All right. Welcome everyone. I'm glad to have you here. We're gonna let also a few more people join in, and we can start in a moment. Feel free to say hi in the chat if you want, and let us know where you're joining from. I'm joining from Jordan, Amman. It's like 7 p.m. right now. It's for Shreyas, it's 9 a.m. So welcome everyone. He's joining from California. Yes, welcome. We have people from Qatar, from Dubai, from Saudi, from Jordan, Istanbul, India. Amazing. California too. Welcome everyone. All right. I think we have a good crowd. We can start. If you allow me at the beginning, I'm gonna introduce you to our community. Product Folks is a volunteer-run community for product people across the Arab world. We've been building space here for product managers, leaders, and founders to learn from each other and also to learn from the best in the industry. And tonight is one of these moments that we've been working towards for a while, and we are very excited to host Shreyas. Shreyas is a well-known expert in product strategy and leadership. He spent his career building at some of the most influential companies, where he led several products at Twitter, Google, Yahoo, including some features and products that you probably use on a daily basis. Also, he was one of the earliest PMs at Stripe. He led two of the Stripe most important products, the Stripe Connect and Terminal, and he became the first PM manager to help them build their entire product organization. Um, Also, since then, Shri has moved into advising and teaching, and he worked with companies like Anthropic, Airtable, Chainlink, and Calci, and worked with hundreds of founders one-on-one on their product strategy and leadership. And tonight, for the first time, we're bringing all of that to the Arab world. So very excited for this. Welcome, Shias, and thank you for making the time for us. And on a personal note, I came across your writing on Twitter many years ago, and that led me to take the World Class Product Sense course. It was a great experience there. So this event means a lot to me. I'm really excited for the next hour. Um, we have a mix of question here. I've prepared some of the question. The community already have sent in some of the question. And also for people joining us right now, you can write your question in the chat, and we can during the session we will pick a few of these and we'll ask it to Shreyas. So without further ado, let me start off with a question and hand it off to you, Shreyas. What is something that you believed early in your career about being a great product manager that you later realized that was wrong?
All right. So thank you everyone for joining. It's great to see everyone. Thank you to the Product Folks community for hosting me. I'm thrilled to spend the next hour or so with you all. Just a couple of things, and then I'll respond to the question you asked. If folks can, whoever can, if you can turn your camera on, that'll be great. Always love seeing live faces. If you cannot, that's fine. But if you're able to turn your camera on, that would be great. Second thing, yes, as Ibrahim said, feel free to post your questions in the chat. We likely, with events with me, we likely usually don't get into, we don't get to every single question. To set expectations, I tend to go a little deeper rather than just kind of going very broad. So that's another factor to consider. But again, if any kind of question comes up, feel free to post your question in the Q&A, meaning in the Zoom chat, and then hopefully we'll get to pick some of those questions as well. All right. So with regards to the question about what is something I believed, early on in my PM career that perhaps I don't, quite believe now. There's actually quite a few things. So perhaps instead of just sharing one thing, maybe I can share a few that come to mind. So the first thing I will share is that early in my PM career, and I would say even up to the middle of my PM career, as I got into PM leadership, I firmly believed that everybody can change and can grow uh, to a tremendous extent in nearly every skill related to product management. I firmly believed it. Okay. And in fact, most of my hiring mistakes, I have not been great at hiring throughout my PM career. And most of my hiring mistakes were rooted in this belief. So, again, to repeat the belief, I thought that everybody can change and grow to a tremendous extent in every PM skill. Okay. And later on in my life, I realized that I was wrong. Um, so I know this is not the most optimistic point to start a session like this with, but I think it's important for me to share authentically what I observed there in myself and in my approach to leadership and my approach to working with PMs. Um, so the first observation is that what I just said goes counter to pretty much every LinkedIn post you will see, right? Because what do LinkedIn posts imply? Pretty much every LinkedIn post implies that some version of you can be anything you want to be, right? And usually on LinkedIn, you get more likes if you say something like, if only your environment was set up in a way that's conducive for you, right? And what that implies is that, oh, if you have a great manager, right? If you join a great company culture, if the company cares about you, if the mission of the company is something that you find very uplifting and inspiring, if your company leadership is excellent. So things like that. Now, notice what's common about the things that get mentioned that if they're all environmental, right? They're not about you, they're about the things around you, right? And so it's useful to recognize that that is a very comforting feeling, right? Because it basically lets us off the hook, which is like, okay, like if you can't grow in this area, or if you struggled in this particular skill, then it's not your fault. It's the problem with the environment. Your manager is not giving you the growth opportunity, right? Or your company has really terrible promotion policies. So how could you grow if you're not given a promotion, right? If you're not given a chance, right? So I just want to call out that, you know, especially these days in most parts of the world, there is this conditioning, this programming that is done in us, which is like, oh, yeah, you can be anything you want to be, and you can grow as much uh, as as you can in any area. And all you need is the right environment, the right training, the right structure, the right mentorship, the right coaching, etc., etc. Okay. Um, so, for a variety of reasons, I believed all of this too. Furthermore, what changed this belief into a strong dogmatic conviction is that I had seen myself grow significantly in many different PM skills, right? And certainly, I think this happens to many people, but certainly it happened to me that early in my life, I thought like, well, like everybody should just be like me, right? It was in hindsight now, it's a very immature, just like, and it's forget immature, it's just an inaccurate perception of the world, right? It's a completely inaccurate perception of the world. But back then I was like, well, if I can do it, why aren't these people growing in this area? Right? And look, it doesn't come out of, I'll just also be clear, it doesn't come out of like, altruism or like, it doesn't come out of, uh, we say it comes out of our belief in others and all of that. No, no, no. This whole idea of like, well, why can't everyone be like me? It actually comes from a place of arrogance. So I was arrogant, right? Well, if I can do it, then, you know, anybody should be able to do this. Should be able to grow in this area. Any PM should be able to be creative, right? Any PM should be able to be strong at XYZ ABC, at negotiation, right? At managing the various personalities on the team and so on and so forth, right? So that was a strong belief. Now, how does this lead to hiring mistakes? One way this leads to hiring mistakes is what I would often do is there was a very clear kind of flaw in the interview process that we found, say, in a PM. Okay. Now, of course, they had some other excellent strengths, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be continuing the conversation. But there was a very clear flaw, okay, and or multiple flaws. And what I would do is actually my instinct as the hiring manager would say, this is not the right hire. But I sort of, tried to suppress that instinct and tried to kind of create a rational explanation, which is, well, yeah, it seems like this person, they got a lot done, but it seems like they just, like in the interview process, it's clear they're not thinking big enough. They're not thinking creatively enough. Okay. So then the way I went about this is I said, oh, you know what? This is coachable. And you know what? As their hiring manager, I'm going to coach them on thinking bigger, right? On having that broader perspective, on strategy, on creativity, whatever else is out there. Okay. So again, you have to understand while the comfortable version of what I'm narrating to you is that, I really believed in people's potential, etc., etc. Right? And yes, there was a part of it, but that was not the primary thing, right? The primary thing was my ego that, I can turn people around, right? Like I can change people, right? That was the primary flaw, not my belief in people, which, while that did exist, that was not the primary thing driving this. Okay, I can fix people, right? And so what I found over and over again, and I had to make this mistake multiple times, uh, but what I found over and over again is that the person would join, right? And of course, like they would do well, but of course, in a few months, it would be clear that this issue, this flaw that we had identified in the interview process, is significantly getting in their way, right? To get to the next level of impact, right? And so then what do? I get into my coaching mode. Like, okay, let's sit down and I'll coach you on this stuff, right? And it worked in some cases. I don't want to say it never worked. It worked in some cases, but the vast majority of cases, it did not work. All right. Now, at this point, because I want to make this interactive, I'm going to ask you all to think about why might it not have worked in many cases, even though I was, you know, paying attention, I was coaching, mentoring the person, and the person said they were very ambitious, right? The person said they wanted to get ahead, but why did my coaching not work? Put it in the Zoom chat. What's your guess? It's okay. Just whatever comes to mind. Why might my coaching on like helping them think bigger, helping them be more creative? Yeah, why did it not work? Yes. Okay. So yeah, basically it's a version of not everyone is coachable. Okay. Now, no, but I don't want to leave it at that. I want to get to a sort of a deeper aspect of that, which is basically they never asked to be coached. This is a very important realization I had much later in my career. So just me telling them, look, like you're doing a decent job. Here are some of the wins, and we are very happy about it. These are your struggles. These are areas where you're get like where you are not meeting expectations. So in order to solve that, what I want to commit to doing as your manager is to work with you closely on these things and to be a guide for you, a coach for you, so that you can level up. Some version of this, not exactly this, but like some version of this conversation. Usually it's over multiple one on ones. It's not even one single one on one, right? So, and I would ask them, so are you open to this? And of course, what are they going to say with the power dynamic that I'm their manager, right? Like they're going to say, yeah, I'm open to it, right? But what I found over and over again, right, over and over again, is that they never opted into this coaching. And why should they? It's not their fault, right? They never opted into this coaching. They never opted into, and it's not even one on one coaching with me. In some cases, it was some other things like go work with this person, go shadow this person, right? Or go take this training, whatever the case might be. None of those things this person had opted into themselves. Right? And in many cases, these folks were simply viewing it as a checkbox activity, which is like, okay, we had our 3 coaching sessions now. So now where's my promotion? Right? Now where's my next level? Right? Now where's my strongly exceeds expectations rating? Right? And and I think this is something that I just learned a much later that yes, people can change. So now I'll kind of bring it all back, which is yes, people can change. Yes, of course, people do grow. Of course, they do. But there are two important realizations here. First, they do not grow on your timeline. They grow on their own timeline. And second, they do not grow in the direction you're pushing them in. They grow in the directions that they are naturally attracted to. So that is something that took me a really long time to realize, recognize, and understand. Right? And what that meant then is that, and particularly I'm kind of focusing this on the hiring, particularly on the hiring issue. I mean, it's much broader than that, but I'm focusing it on the hiring issue. Uh, what I realized is that I gotta listen to that intuition when I'm hiring people, right? And when I feel like, okay, yes, there is a significant problem in some area, right? That is relevant for the job, that I should not, it is actually not fair for myself, it's not fair for the company, nor is it fair for the individual, the employee, that I say, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and hire them anyway, despite this flaw in an important area, with the expectation that they'll grow, right? Because actually, with that, again, understand that while I can, like, from an optics perspective, I can frame this as like, I'm such a good person. Like I, Shreyas, am such a good person. I believed in people, all of that. It's none of that. It was basically my ego getting in the way of seeing the reality of the situation. Okay. So yeah, that's my response. And in this is embedded like quite a few sort of, micro lessons as well of the things I learned along the way. Okay.
Great.
Ibrahim, are there any kind of follow-up questions that people have to this that are worth looking into right now?
So a lot of them were mentioning to what you were saying, they have to be the one who ask, right? To be coach, they have to have the intention for that. Um, some of them were asking if empathy was missing in this case, and it's required more maybe from the coach or mentor, but it might be unintentional.
Yeah, maybe I can respond to that. Like I would agree that like I was not being empathetic enough, right? And look, this point about being empathetic, it's not about manipulation, right? It's not about, oh, your empathy was missing in the sense that, oh, if you could have figured out some way in which to convince them, right? It's not about that. It was the empathy was missing at a more fundamental human level, which is to understand that people grow on their own timeline and people grow in their own directions, in directions that pull them naturally, right? So, in that sense, yes, there was a lot of empathy missing. And the problem is that when one's own ego is dominant, right, which was the case for me, what ends up happening is, and ego tends to get overused. So I'll be more specific. Uh, when I was viewing everything from the perspective of like, look how great I am, right? Look how great I am as a manager, right? So I'm talking about that aspect of the ego, not the ego in general, because the ego has many components. But this whole thing of look how great I am at product management and look how great I am as a manager, right? When that aspect of our identity is dominant on a day-to-day basis, one of the many costs of that tendency is that we will not be able to have empathy for other people because we are so self-absorbed. And I certainly was so self-absorbed, right? That I was not able to create enough empathy for the true situation of others, uh, and that can get in the way.
Okay.
Yeah,
So maybe to complement it in another way, like, is there like a specific mindset or a trait that has to be in the PMs that you've noticed to have successful careers? Do they have to have like self-awareness, let's say, or where they want to go? Like, what is that mindset or trait that you find?
yeah. So I'll respond to that with two different perspectives. So the first is that it turns out that product managers can succeed in a variety of different ways. This is why, like, one of the core things that I suggest to people is whenever you are trying to think about, certain issues, such as the one covered by this question, just look at your own experience, right? So now, when you look at your own experience and look at the most successful product managers you've seen, and not like one or two, but like five, six, seven, right? The most successful, the most effective product managers you have worked with, right? So multiple of them. What you will notice is that they are quite different, right? Some are just great at like analytics and they're just very strong analytical thinkers. Some other ones are just great at influencing the team and getting the team to relentlessly keep executing on very difficult goals, right? Some others are extremely talented on design, or some others are extremely talented in the domain, right? They're actually not so great at, some of the other aspects. They might not be great at, gracefully negotiating, right? They might not even be extremely great at influence. They might be okay at influence, right? But they're so outstanding in their domain, right? They understand the domain so well, and they have such strong intuition of the domain, right? That takes them far, right? And so that's the first thing I want to observe is that there isn't this kind of template of the one great product manager, right? Which is, oh, the one great product manager is always very humble, is always an excellent verbal communicator, always inspires the team, is very likable by every cross-functional team member, is extremely creative, is extremely customer focused, responds to every Slack message within 30 seconds, no matter what the time of the day is, responds to every email within 10 minutes, etc., etc., etc. Right? That is not actually a reflection of reality. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. Just look at your own experience. Just inspect your own experience. All right. See what you've seen in product managers who are highly effective, right? And you'll find that they actually are quite diverse in terms of their superpowers, in terms of their ways of approaching work. All right. So that's the first perspective I wanted to share in response to this question. Um, the now let me get to the specific point about like, okay, what is a mindset or a trait that tends to exist in highly successful product managers? Uh, so because of what I said earlier, the first part of my response, right? Like what I want to state up front is that there is no one trait or mindset that is the magic trait, right? I have worked with highly effective product managers who don't have a growth mindset. They have a fixed mindset. I have worked with equally effective, equally great product managers who have an intense growth mindset, right? They are the embodiment of a growth mindset. Okay. So, and again, I'm just sharing my experience, but why don't you look at your own experience of having worked with many different product managers and see what you see there, what you spot there, right? So, all that being said, the one tendency um, of highly effective product managers, the one mindset of highly effective product managers that at least has a very high correlation, at least a very high correlation, is that they do not shy away from hard problems and from the act of solving for ambiguous situations. Okay, so that mindset, that problem solving mindset, is something that I've found has a very high correlation with high degrees of success and effectiveness as a product manager. Okay, now one would think that this mindset of, yes, I'm going to go solve this problem, yes, I'm going to tackle this problem, yes, this is a tough problem, but I'm not going to ignore it, I'm going to confront it head on, right? One would think that, oh yeah, like, that should be coachable, right? It has been my experience that it is not coachable. That is why, like, that is why I say it's an aspect of mindset. It's not a skill. You see, a skill is typically coachable, is typically teachable. a new mindset or a different mindset, right, is learnable, but not teachable or coachable. Meaning at the right time in your life, due to the certain experiences, usually it's failures. Doesn't have to be failures, but usually it's failures. Due to certain experiences, one might change or adapt their mindset to, okay, I'm going to actually solve problems, right? Meaning I'm going to confront problems head on, right? I'm actually going to be like almost excited about problems, right? That could happen. That sort of transformation could happen in a person. But that only happens when the person is ready, like truly ready. Okay. So that is why I say it is a mindset thing. It is not a skill thing, right? Yes, there is a problem solving skill, but that problem solving skill can only like ever sort of get manifested in reality when the mindset is there. If the mindset is not there, the skill is not going to get developed. So that is the main one, the mindset aspect that I've seen quite consistently with highly effective, highly successful product managers. And the reason it is so important is because basically everything you do in product is some kind of problem, right? You're constantly like tackling some problems, and the people can who are not afraid of hard problems and then over time also develop good judgment around which problems to solve and which problems to not solve, right? Those are the people that end up being very effective. And lastly, it turns out the second aspect, the judgment around which problems to solve and which problems to not solve, is a separate skill, right? So there's some people who have this great problem solving mindset. Over time, they've developed good problem solving skills, but they still don't have discernment on which problems to solve and which problems to actually leave alone, right? And then what happens is that then they try to solve every problem. How many of you worked with a product manager? Maybe you are that product manager yourself, but how many of you have worked with a product manager who's like otherwise very smart, very effective, very hardworking, but they are just complaining all the time about all the problems? It's like, oh, this is broken, that is broken, this is broken, that is broken. And like, of course, in this environment, nothing can get done. And how like just messed up the situation is. Put in the Zoom chat, me or I, say I or me, if like you've seen, if you've worked with such product managers, if you manage such product managers, if you yourself been such a product manager, right? Like, what's going on with this product manager who's otherwise very highly effective is that they're so good at this product problem solving skill that they try to apply that skill to everything. But the reality is, in any complex system, there's always going to be problems, right? And so that discernment of which problems to solve and which problems to leave alone is actually quite important. And here's another advanced thing that happens. Once you had a certain degree of experience, you also understand that when you solve one problem, you actually create a few downstream problems. Okay? So when that happens, that is destined to happen, basically. But that doesn't mean now that we now try to solve the downstream problem. Because what happens is when you try to solve that downstream problem, you're going to create another problem. Okay. And so what happens is a lot of product teams, what they're doing is they don't understand this. The leader doesn't understand what I just said. So they are on this constant treadmill of like solving problems that don't matter in the grand scheme of things. Right? Because they get that huge dopamine hit of like, oh, we fixed this. Right? But it's like, okay, you fix this, but you don't realize that now there's going to be 2 months down the road, you created another problem. And then 2 months down the road, when the problem surfaces, they say, oh, here's some new problem. Let's try to fix that. Right? By the way, to be clear, I'm not saying avoid problems, right? I'm saying, like, in fact, what I'm saying is one also needs to develop judgment of which problems are worth solving and which problems are not worth solving. Okay, so that is that next level of skill. Once you get great at problem solving itself, what can happen is now you have this one hammer, which is like, oh, I'm great at problem solving, so I'm just going to hit every single nail or every single thing I see with this hammer, right? And what I am saying is that you should let some nails alone, leave some nails alone, right? It's okay. You don't have to use this hammer on every single nail. Okay. So yeah, that's my response to the question.
A quick follow-up on the hiring that you mentioned. How can I distinguish if it's a skill issue or a mindset issue?
Specifically, which part? Like, what issue are we talking about?
Because you mentioned like sometimes your gut feeling is telling you this one will not work. Is it because you spotted that there's a problem with the mindset? And as we said, mindset things are hard to be coachable and it has to be on their timeline. So how do we distinguish if it's just like a skill problem and I'm able to coach this guy or the one I'm hiring versus no, this is an actual mindset issue and I should refuse this candidate?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that is very tough, and I would generally not recommend trying to diagnose, uh, you know, the mindset aspect in interviews because, we all think, and I certainly count myself in this, like we all think we are great readers of people, right? But no matter how great your interview process is, it's very difficult to understand all aspects of somebody's mindset. Okay. Now, however, you can understand and learn about some targeted aspects of somebody's mindset. Okay. So perhaps I can kind of go a little deeper into that and share some ideas um, on how that works out. Okay. In practice. So again, remember everything I share is about the real practice of doing work, not theory, right? Not theory. Not theory that looks good on LinkedIn or on Twitter or on Substack, right? The real practice of how things happen. Okay. So there are many clues that people leave about their mindset in the interview process. And so, like, one thing that's important is you have to understand what are the top mindset aspects you are testing for. Okay, so let's take an example. So that's the first tip, by the way, is like what are the top aspects of mindset that you're testing for? All right. Now, actually consider this for a second. How many of you who've written a job description have ever listed out mindset for yourself, not in the job description necessarily, for yourself, some mindset factors that you are testing for in the interview process? How many times have you seen that when you've been part of an interview panel? Is it a common thing? Put in the Zoom chat. Is it common or not common? Yeah, it's extremely uncommon, right? It's extremely uncommon, right? So that itself is actually an improvement over the status quo, right? Okay, so that's like just the first thing I'll highlight. Again, in practice, everything in practice, right? In theory, everybody will say, oh, mindset is very important. I hire for mindset. Okay, what are the top three mindset factors you've listed somewhere, even privately, that you're screening for, right? It's very rare. It's very rare, right? Okay, so now let's make it a little more concrete, right? With perhaps an example, right? So let's say you one of the mindset aspects you are sort of looking for is someone who who is genuinely passionate about the product itself. Somebody who's super passionate about the product itself. Okay, how many times have we seen something like this in a job description? Must have strong passion for solving this problem. How many times have you seen that in a job description? You must have seen it very often, right? It's almost in every JD, isn't it? Right? Okay, cool. So that's like a nice mindset aspect, right? Passion for this area, right? Okay. So now, how many times are you explicitly testing for that bullet point in your job description? How many times are you testing? Like, are you testing the passion? Are you testing for passion in the interview process? No, most people aren't, right? Like, and it's okay. You don't have to have a separate interview called the passion interview, right? You don't have to have that, right? However, the candidate is giving you clues on their mindset because passion is an aspect of mindset, right? Passion is not a skill, right? The candidate is giving you clues. Do you want to know what those clues are? Here. So let's say you're talking to somebody, say at a director level, right? And again, you've said passion for this problem, passion for this area is very important. So let's say you're talking to a director level PM, you're interviewing a director level PM or even a GPM level PM. So somebody who's like, who has experience, somebody who has context, right? Somebody who's kind of done a bunch of things. Fair? Okay. So let's say you're interviewing such a person. Pay attention to the questions they first ask you about the job. So how does this work? You have a conversation at some point, you will say, what questions do you have? You might say it at the beginning or you might say it at the end. Yes? Right? Okay. Now, if in this conversation, the first question from this candidate, who otherwise is very impressive, they have a great resume, they're very impressive, they tell you they are very passionate. In fact, when you ask them, so here's how most people test for passion. They say, what makes you interested in this role? That's the question they ask. What makes you interested in this role? Right? Is this a common interview question? Some version of this. What makes you interested in this job? What makes you interested in this company? Why are you applying? That some version of this. Very common question, right? So we think that that question is actually going to test for interest. Now, usually if again, remember, it's a sophisticated PM, right? How good or bad is their answer going to be to this question? How good or bad? Is it going to be a bad answer or a good answer usually? To like, why are you interested in this role? What makes you interested in this role? It's going to be an amazing answer, right? They'll say, I have strong, I really believe in the power of AI to improve media, if that's the domain, right? And I believe it's going to democratize access and it's going to make the world a better place, da 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 da, whatever. And let me tell you, I did that, 3 years ago at this company. And so that like really, was very fulfilling, da 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 da, right? Yes or no? Their answer is going to be really impressive. So then what do you do in a typical interview process? You say, great, check. They are very passionate. But now understand, this is a sophisticated person. I mean, this is literally like how they do their job, right? Like they make other people inspired. They make other people feel motivated. They persuade other people, right? So in a way, they are showing you job relevant skills, but they're actually not proving that they have passion, right? What shows their passion in the product is actually the question they ask you. So now, let's say in this situation, the first question that this director level person asks is, can you give me a sense of the size of the team and the growth plans for the team? Is this a reasonable question that people will ask in an interview process, that people commonly ask, as a candidate? Yes or no? Yes. No, it is, right? Okay. The next question they ask you is, can you give me an idea of what other cross-functional leaders I will be working with? Is this a question that people typically ask? Yes, of course they do, right? Okay. Next question. What are the growth prospects for someone in this role? Or another version of this is, what are the 6-month, 12-month expectations you have for someone in this role? Is that a common question that usually a leadership candidate will ask? Okay, great. Are these bad questions to ask in a leadership? No, it's not. These are not bad questions. But what is important to understand, and here's where I give you a hypothetical. What if those questions that I shared with you, what if those were the first 3 questions this candidate asked in your very first conversation? What are you learning from this? What is the candidate telling you about themselves? Think about it and put in the Zoom chat. What is the candidate telling you about themselves by asking these questions? Again, remember, passion for the product is really important. You are saying passion for the product, for this domain, for this problem is really important. Okay. All right. I know this is an advanced question, so I will ask you a few other questions so you understand. So that was candidate A. So candidate A basically asked questions about what's the size of the team, what are the growth plans of the team, what are the core people and leaders I'll be working with, right? Like, how is that infrastructure set up, right? Do I have certain cross-functional partners? Who owns what? Right? Where is people's responsibility lie, et cetera, right? And the third question is, what are your expectations? How are you going to evaluate me in this role? How am I going to be evaluated? What does my growth trajectory look like? Does that make sense? Those were the first several questions this candidate asked. Candidate A. All right. Now, candidate B asks the following questions. I'm curious. I did some research on our product, on this product, and I'm curious, while the product is doing really well, and I can see that in the market, where is the product most falling short in meeting customer needs? Question one. Okay. Question two. Our product or this product, I noticed, is not addressing use cases A, B, and C. And I see another product from a startup that is actually starting to address use cases A, B, and C for customers. And I'm curious if this is an intentional decision, if this is a strategic choice that we have made, or if this is just something that there are plans to work on to address use cases A, B, and C. So that's question two. Okay. Question three. Does the team and org at this point have clarity on the product strategy or have clarity on how we are prioritizing the next 1 or 2 years worth of work that is going to occur on the team? So those are the 3 questions candidate B asked. Say they were among the first few questions candidate B asked. Now, my friends, please tell me, which candidate is showing a true passion for the product and the domain? A or B? How can you tell? How were you able to tell? And why? Why is this important? Why is this important? How are you able to tell? Right. Look, you all actually appreciated. You all appreciated the questions candidate A asked. Yes or no? You all said, "Oh, that shows they're thoughtful. It shows they, various other things. They're excited, interested, like that sort of whatever it was." Yes or no? So, do you see how it is easy to get impressed with candidate A? However, the very questions that candidate A asked indicate that candidate A does not have that strong passion for the product, the customers, the domain. Or certainly does not have as much passion for the product, the customers, the domain as candidate B. Is that clear? Now, why is this very evident in the questions they ask you and not so evident in the answers they provide to your questions? You know why? Because again, at certain levels, PMs are very sophisticated, right? They know exactly the answer you are looking for. That is actually one of the PM skills. Like that actually makes them effective on the job. So it's not a nonsense skill. It's actually a useful skill. They're just manifesting that skill in the interview setting, right? So when you ask them a question that is oriented around passion, right? Of course, they're going to give you a beautiful answer. But when they have, see, here's how you read a person. So this gets to, like, I'll complete my answer to the original question. The way you read a person is by looking at what they do and what they say when there are no constraints. See, in the questions they ask you, there are no constraints. They can ask you any question under the sun. It is at that point at which they are like showing it's a tell, basically, like a poker tell. It's a tell. Because when there are no constraints, a, a certain type of candidate will be very interested in things like what are the expectations in the role, what are the optics, what is the org structure, how big is this org going to get, etc., etc. And these are not bad questions. You do need to understand these things before taking a job. But if those are the things that you gravitate to in your very first set of questions, then isn't it logical that this individual does not have as much natural passion for the product and the domain as candidate B, who naturally gravitated towards those questions about the product, about the customers, about the use cases? Okay? So, my suggestion is be clear on the mindset factors that matter to you, right? And surely you can ask a few questions to kind of evaluate that mindset, right? But what you need to be more attuned to is like what they say when there are no constraints. I'll give one last example just on this mindset of passion for the product, right? So let's say, you go through a 4-week interview process. So is it reasonable that there will at least be a 4-week interview process for any kind of mid-level to senior role, right? 4 weeks, like it's not that long, right? So let's say you go through a 4-week, 6-week interview process. What I tell founders to do is look at the delta between their knowledge of the product when they began the interview process to the end of the interview process. Because there needs to be a meaningful delta in their knowledge and understanding of the product between when you began and when you ended the process. If there isn't a significant delta, that is another tell. Because see, a person who's naturally interested in your product and in that domain will not be able to help themselves in doing research. They'll just keep doing research in this 4-week, 6-week period because they're just naturally attracted to that. It's almost fun for them. But a person who's not naturally attracted to that domain, they will show very little delta in their own understanding of the product and their domain. Right? So these are signals that people are giving you. And these are signals that will also apply when they take the job. right? These are signals that will be valid when they take the job. So pay attention to those signals. Okay, so that's my answer to this question.
Great.
And
Last follow-up
I'm
on
conscious of time, so maybe we can go like, if it's okay, if with folks, we'll go like a few minutes over.
yes, we would love that. More time with
Mhm.
you. Uh, Maybe last question on this that was mentioned also a lot on the chat. Now, with the AI, there's always the pressure from stakeholder and everyone. We have all the tools now to solve more problem and ship faster. So how does that resonate with what you mentioned? Not all problem has to be solved. How do I manage that?
Yeah, so yes, you can ship faster with AI. That is true. But let's look at it in practice. Like, who here is now building 10 times the number of features in the same duration? Put me in the Zoom chat if you're building 10 times or more the number of features. So previously, for like a real product, for not for some side project, right? So like for your real product, for your actual product, in a given 4 week period, you are building more than 10x the features that you used to build. And just so that I've clarified this, so please put I if this is true for you. Like you are building 10 times or more the number of features for a real product. Okay. So not a side project, not your vibe coded project, for your real product that you're working on, who is actually shipping more than 10 times the number of features. Okay. So I see two me's after I provided that clarification that I'm not talking about your vibe coded product. I'm talking about your real product that is out there in the world that customers are using, that is a serious product. Is that right? Two people, right? Three people. All right. Three people. Four people. All right. So four people are shipping 10x the number of features for their real product. Okay. All right. So basically, that means that 90% of people are not shipping 10x the features. Yes. With AI. Right. 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 Yes. Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. So who's shipping 100x the features in a given 4 week period? Now, anybody? No, who meaning are you? Nobody. Okay. Uh, so yes, AI has made, shipping much faster. That is true. That is true. But 90% of you are not shipping 10x the features. Okay. Maybe you're shipping 2x the features, 3x the features. Yes? Now, in order to figure out which of those 2x or 3x features to ship, what are you doing? How are you figuring that out? How are you figuring that out? Because there's still, like, if you ship 2x features, 3x features, you're still left with many features that you're not shipping, right? Okay, you're using data, you're using standard stuff, research, analysis, customer inputs, whatever, competitive analysis, various other things. Yes? Okay, cool. All right. So, what does this mean? What does this kind of line of thinking mean in practice then? Right? It means that you are still not solving all the problems that you could be solving. Yes or no? You're solving many more problems, but you're not solving all the problems you could be solving, even with AI. Yes? Okay, so that's first. Second, now please everyone pay attention to what I'm going to ask you now. When you build a feature, when you build a capability in a product, in your product, does that then sometimes or usually preclude a different feature that you could build? Meaning, it makes it structurally impossible to build a different feature that you could have built. Think about it, and I'll maybe give you a concrete example. Say there was a big debate. Should we have a comprehensive onboarding flow that captures all user information upfront at onboarding? Or should we have a very light onboarding flow? Now, those are two features you can build. Two features you can build. Two different features you can build. Yes? Once you pick one, you preclude the other, don't you? I mean, you exclude the other. Yeah, you can do A/B tests, but at some point you'll pick the better performing version. Yes or no? Right? And you'll say, no, we'll do a dynamic onboarding flow, which will show the longer onboarding because AI, all this nonsense. Okay, so that means now you're building like a dynamic onboarding, which is for some customers, you send them through the comprehensive flow. And for some other customers, you send them through the light flow, depending on some probabilities of which one will convert better. Okay, cool. First of all, very few systems have this, but okay, your system has this capability. Yes? Okay, but you are still now in a world where the choice of one feature basically creates the exclusion of the other possible feature. Yes or no? So now my question is, how will you decide which is the right way to go? Right? And in this case, of course, you'll do some experiments to figure that out. Right? Now, when you pick a comprehensive onboarding flow, what problem have you created? So the comprehensive onboarding flow worked better through your experiments for retention. For retained revenue, it worked better, let's just say. Okay, so you pick the comprehensive flow. Now, what problem have you created by picking that flow? Yeah, you've reduced top of funnel. You've increased complaints from users, which is like, this is too much information. You're asking for driver's license, and I don't happen to have one. So now customer support is going to get all these queries and complaints. Yes or no? So by solving one problem, you have created a few downstream problems, haven't you? Now, please tell me if AI will help you fix these problems. Because now AI writes code 24/7. Will AI help you fix these problems? On the margins, yes, but overall, no. Right? The problem exists because of a structural choice you made, and that was the optimal choice. Right? So the point here is, and I'm just using this as one example, but this is the true practice of product. Right? And lastly, let me ask you one other question. So for those of you who are building 10x features, is it true that by the end of this year, you will have 300 more features than you would have otherwise had? Or 200 more features than you would have had otherwise? Or 100 more features than you would have had otherwise? Right. What happens? See, are you like, is the whole point just keep building more and more features? Well, there is some limiting agent here, right? What is the limiting agent? It's the user's attention. Now, okay, now if you're building for AI agents, that's a separate issue because theoretically AI agents have infinite attention and full concentration, right? But if you're building for humans, okay, cool. Now you have 100 extra features. But like, what does that do to your product? Right? So these are all things, even in this AI world, right? Like, by the way, I'm so delighted that, shipping things, prototyping things is just magical now, right? But the fact still remains that even in this AI world, it would be foolish to solve every single problem because of the principle that solving a problem creates another problem. Okay, and for this, again, don't take this on faith. Just look at your entire work life. Where you solved a problem, it created another problem. You just have to be willing and okay to live with that other problem, right? Right? So that's my response to this question.
All right. So for the sake of time, maybe we'll ask the last question. So you talk a lot about product sense, and it's one of the, let's say, most important and durable skill for product managers. how is that actually going to be helped for the junior PMs right now, especially when AI is doing a lot of the repetition that we used to do, the analysis, the prototype, the specs, and all of that. How they used to learn from. So how can they build that product sense?
Yeah, my main recommendation there for junior PMs, mid-level PMs, and even senior PMs, honestly, is that by all means, like use AI. By all means, use AI. Use the tools that are so powerful. Use them. Use them as much as it makes sense to use them. But as you use them, pay attention, right? Pay attention. See, many people, what is happening is they are not paying attention. They've stopped paying attention or they were never paying attention, right? And so, what I mean by paying attention is learn how to read carefully, learn how to evaluate the AI outputs carefully. Now, I'll say something which will sound basic to nearly all of you, but this is true. And if you just look at the world around you and the day to day life you are living, you will see that this is true. Have you noticed how people are not actually carefully reading or carefully analyzing what AI has produced? I'm talking about a basic skill, folks. I'm not talking about something advanced. I'm simply saying, did you read what it said carefully? Did you think about it carefully? Did you decompose it carefully? Did you figure out where it gave a great insight and where it gave a crappy insight? Even though both of those insights were packaged in some really great language, right? That is the attention that I'm talking about. And this applies whether the AI is producing, standard chat style answers or documents for you, and it applies when AI is producing prototypes, right? It applies to all AI output. Are you carefully looking at it? Are you paying attention to it? And I know, again, it sounds basic, and some of you are thinking, Shreyas, give me something advanced. But I will tell you that nobody, almost nobody I work with, and I work with some of the best product people in the world in my coaching, and some of the best founders out there. Right? So we're talking a very high bar. And even there, I'm saying almost nobody I work with is paying attention, as much attention as they should, to what AI is producing. Right? So that is my recommendation. I'm not recommending, oh, avoid tools and do it on your own to build the skill for junior PMs. No, use the tools. Of course, use the tools. Pay attention. Right? Because that will differentiate you. It turns out you might think, oh, this is not an advanced enough insight. But I'll tell you, paying attention will differentiate you versus 90 plus percent of other very, very talented people who are basically not paying attention, right? Who are not critically thinking. Think for yourself. Okay. So that's my main tip.
All right. I think this has been great. Uh, Thank you, Shreyas, for the time. I think it was an enjoyable hour. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I would urge you to share your takeaway. There was a lot of great takeaways from this session. You can share it on LinkedIn and tag us and keep the conversation there. And we'll definitely share the recording with everyone soon. So yeah, thank you again, Shreyas, for giving the time, and thanks everyone for being here tonight. And hopefully we'll see you in the next events.
Wonderful. Thank you again to the product folks community for having me. This was a pleasure. I loved the questions. Loved all your engagement in the chat. And thank you all for joining. Really appreciate you taking the time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.